This is episode 131 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Toby Capwell, curator of Arms and Armor at the Wallace Collection in London. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend, Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
The 16th century was the first time in English history and the first time in most of European history that the average person started carrying a weapon as a matter of daily life. The rapier specifically came into fashion in England in the mid-16th century, and while it plays a prominent role in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare mentions the rapier specifically over 30 times in his plays, including Hamlet, Love's Labour's Lost, and the Henriade plays. The specific terminology Shakespeare has characters like Mercutio use to refer to passado, staccato, and the punto reverso were Italian fencing terms, from manuals being published at the same time that Shakespeare was writing Romeo and Juliet. More than just a reference to a single manual, though, as our guest this week points out, rapier fencing was a huge cultural moment in England, with official edicts from Elizabeth I being passed to try and limit or even outright ban the use of rapiers in London at the same time that some of the noblemen in England were actively hiring these same Italian fencing masters, specifically to learn this new and rapidly popular art form. Here this week to take us back to the 1590s and explore the moment in history that Shakespeare was writing about the rapier and explain what was going on in the very moment that William Shakespeare had Mercutio call Tybalt a cat who fights from the Book of Arithmetic is our guest, Tobias Capwell. Dr. Tobias Capwell is curator of arms and armor at the Wallace Collection in London, home to one of the world's greatest collections of medieval and Renaissance weapons. He is also a well-known author, TV personality, and historical martial artist. His books include Armor of the English Knight from 1400 to 1450, Arms and Armor of the Medieval Joust, Arms and Armor of the Renaissance Joust, and Masterpieces of European Arms and Armor in the Wallace Collection. In 2012, he curated the major exhibition, The Noble Art of the Sword, Fashion and Fencing in Renaissance Europe, from 1520 to 1630, the first international show to focus on the rapier and civilian combat in the early modern period. Toby is also a founding member of the modern historical jousting community and has fought in major tournaments all over the world. In 2015, he had the unusual honor of serving as one of two fully armored horsemen, escorting the remains of King Richard III from the battlefield at Bosworth to their final resting place in Leicester Cathedral. You can follow Toby on Instagram at Tobias Capwell. Links to that, as well as his work, will be in the show notes for today's episode. Hello, Toby. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Toby, please explain the rapier for us in terms of a style of weapon. What exactly is a rapier?
Well, that's a very important question. And like a lot of important questions, it's difficult, it's complicated, and there's really no easy or simple answer. But we have to approach the question and see what we can say about it, because it defines everything that we're going to talk about, really, when it comes to Shakespeare and swords. The rapier is defined by its context, its functional context, the habitat in which it exists, rather than its typology, rather than the length of the blade or the type of hilt or whatever. That's the first key point. The typology did become more specific later, but essentially, when rapiers first appeared in Italy in about 1520, their defining characteristic is that they are a sword that is carried as part of one's everyday dress in civilian life. And in 1520 or thereabouts, that was really new. In the Middle Ages, previously, everyone carried knives for self-defense, but swords were not really socially acceptable in civilian life. People didn't swagger around with swords on their hips in the Middle Ages. And if you did, you'd be arrested. It was understood that when you're traveling, that's an appropriate time to wear a sword because there's no police forces and your own safety is your own business on the road. You wear swords when you're hunting. You wear swords, of course, ultimately, most importantly, when you go to war in the service of your lord or your king. And that's a very important note. We have to keep that in mind for later discussion. There is an association from ancient times between the sword and noble, honorable service for one's country, one's people, one's lords. Okay? So wearing a sword in everyday life was new from around 1520. And it starts in Italy and grows very rapidly to become an absolutely universal in Europe Renaissance fashion and convention.
Excited to see more? Subscribe today at cassidycash.com/experience to watch this entire interview, bonus archaeological footage, and documentaries, and more, all about the life of William Shakespeare. I'll see you inside.